Today's readings bring us back to the framework from which I spoke on a number of topics earlier in my homily series that I've been doing on different cultural issues. These readings we have today show clearly God's original plan for marriage and family. First reading from Genesis, it reveals that God created marriage as a unity of husband and wife. Jesus then makes reference to this original plan of his Father there in the Gospel when he's asked about the question of divorce. Jesus affirms that God's plan from the beginning has not changed, that the unitive end of marriage is meant to be indissoluble. What God has joined together, no human being must separate. And then the Gospel connects this unitive end of marriage with the second end of marriage, which is the procreative end of marriage. As Jesus immediately after that declares, "Let the children come to me." And that echoes what we would find if we continue in reading Genesis. We find God's call for them to be fruitful and multiply as well. And even the psalm tonight speaks of this end of marriage, that your wife shall be like a fruitful vine in the recesses of your home, your children like olive plants around your table. So, when the unitive and procreative ends of marriage, that part of God's original plan, end up being broken apart, there are many things that can go wrong. And this is what I explained in a number of my homilies earlier on in this series, that there are certain practices, certain issues that go on in our world today that are contrary to this original plan that God gave us. So I gave one on contraception, how it removes procreation completely from the unitive act and from marriage. Abortion, too, it becomes a consequence of the contraceptive mentality, further removing the thought of children from the unitive act. Then, if we can have union without procreation, why not procreation without union? And that's precisely what certain technologies like IVF or surrogacy do. They separate procreation from the need of spousal union. Of course, once you, in this way, separate procreation from the unitive act of husband and wife, then one can begin to question, what need is there for that biological complementarity of man and woman at all? Sexual union doesn't have anything to do with the possibility of children, so why not same-sex relations or unions? And then, if sex and marriage have nothing to do with this biological complementarity between men and women, then maybe there's actually no real difference between men and women at all, and that anyone can be whatever they decide to identify with inside. And so I gave homilies on each of these different ones, and if you missed one that you're interested in learning more, how do we think about or talk about these as Catholics, I encourage you to go back and find those homilies through our website or our Facebook pages. Because each of these really kind of end up being all about what adults desire to do, without always considering what are the consequences that these have on children. So reflecting upon what we see Jesus describing in our readings today, that the fact that God has made marriage to be unbreakable, I want to focus really today on the needs that children have for both a mother and a father. Starting with biology itself, we know that every single child, regardless of the specific nature of their family situation, every single child has a mother and a father. Marriage is the only institution there is that ensures that fathers and mothers will remain united with each other and with any children that come from their union. Because the need for every child to have a father and mother goes much further beyond this. And we see this especially even in investigations, research through child development. So, for example, in general, fathers encourage competition that engenders independence, while mothers promote equality, creating a sense of security. Dads emphasize conceptual communication, which helps children expand vocabularies and intellectual capacities, while moms major in sympathy and care and help and demonstrate the importance of relationships. Neither style of parenting is adequate in and of itself. Taken together, mothers and fathers balance one another and provide the unique roles that the lives of their children need of. Both mothers and fathers are indispensable for their children. And while I'm sure that no one would question that, especially for mothers, in their role for their children, it would be good for us to reflect a little bit more on the important role that fathers have, especially since we're in the year of St. Joseph, the model of fathers. So we can look at some of the studies that have been done. One 26-year-long study, researchers found that the number one factor in developing empathy in children is father involvement. Fathers spending regular time with their children translated into children who become more compassionate adults. Another study found that an emotionally close relationship with one's father provides a broad, secure foundation for those in adolescent years. And that's especially true for fathers and daughters. For example, a daughter who knows that she is loved by her father will not be drawn away into the empty flattery of immature men who may only seek to use her, because she already knows that she is beautiful and loved because her father has told her so. And this is also true about fathers in the area of faith as well. Multiple studies indicate a long-term impact of the father's faith on his children. According to one study, if a father doesn't go to church, even if the mother does go, only 2% of their children will grow up to practice the faith regularly. But if a father does go regularly, even if the mother doesn't go, around 70% of their children will continue to practice the faith into adulthood. One survey also found that in households where the mother joins the faith, converts to Christianity, there's a 17% chance that the other family members will follow her. But if the father joins the faith, there is a 93% chance that the rest of the family will freely follow him. We see this in the lives of the saints, like Saint Therese of Lisieux, whose feast day we celebrate on Friday. Her holiness was fostered by her parents, Louis and Zélie Martin, who themselves are now canonized saints. And especially for her, the faith of her father, since her mother died when Therese was only 4. And we see this too for Saint Pope John Paul II. He spoke of the great influence of seeing his father in prayer. His mother had actually died when he was 8. Pope Francis, he gave a whole series on general audiences on the family back in 2015, and he spoke too about the important roles of mothers and fathers. Just to point out a few things he said about fathers specifically, he says every family needs a father present in the family, that he be close to his wife to share everything, joy and sorrow, hope and hardship, and that he be close to his children as they grow, when they play and when they strive, when they are carefree and when they're distressed, when they're talkative and when they're silent, when they're daring and when they're afraid, when they take a wrong step, and when they find their path again. A father who's always present. And Pope Francis lamented over the fact that sometimes there is an absence of fathers. He said fathers are sometimes so concentrated on themselves or on work that at times their career, that they forget about their family. The absent father figure in the life of little ones and young people causes gaps and wounds that can maybe be even very serious. And in effect, delinquency among children and adolescents can be largely attributed to this lack, to the shortage of examples and authoritative guidance in their everyday life, a shortage of closeness, a shortage of love from their father. This, of course, doesn't mean that every single child that lacks the witness of a father will automatically be lost. In the case of St. Augustine, his mother Monica was Catholic, but his father Patricius was not. In fact, he was so anti-Catholic, he didn't want Augustine to be baptized at all. And perhaps that led some influence upon Augustine's misspent youth. But through the grace of God and Monica's years of prayer and tears, Augustine returned to the faith, becoming one of the church's greatest theologians. Yet, it's true even for Augustine that his conversion required the fatherly presence of St. Ambrose. So, with all of this, there is more than enough evidence to call us men to take greater responsibility for passing on the faith to our children, and to encourage all of our brothers who are here to gently guide also our brothers who are not with us to take up this call from God as well. Finally, for a moment, I want to speak to those who find themselves in family situations of great woundedness, even to the point of the breakdown of marriage that's talked about in the gospel today. Since in those cases, ensuring that a mother and father are both present for their children can be a challenge at times. Yes, in speaking to the Pharisees, Jesus points out that mothers and fathers are not ever meant to break apart. But for those who may have experienced that from your own parents, Pope Francis acknowledges that, while of course you love them, it's okay to admit that there's also pain. That when a mom and dad hurt one another, the souls of children do suffer. When a man and woman have become one flesh, all of their wounds have an impact upon the living flesh of their children. Marriage and family were not designed by God for that. And for those who yourselves have gone through separation or divorce, I know that sometimes it might feel that from the church not to be very welcoming or not understanding enough. Well, Pope Francis speaks into that as well, saying that, yes, there are some cases in which separation might be inevitable. At times it becomes even morally necessary when it's a matter of removing a weaker spouse or the young children from the gravest wounds that might be caused by abuse or violence, by humiliation and exploitation, by disregard and indifference. The Church, of course, doesn't want people to live in that. But there are, thanks be to God, he continues, those who, sustained by faith and by love for their children, bear witness to their fidelity, to the bond they believed in, although it may seem impossible to revive it. You see, while the church, following Jesus, cannot incorporate divorce into God's original plan for marriage, we certainly do not desire that those who go through such pain be separated from our family of faith. And I think here we can look to the account of Jesus meeting the Samaritan woman at the well. In that passage, it describes that this woman had had 5 husbands, and she was currently living with a man to whom she was not married. And we don't really need to speculate upon the exact nature of the brokenness that caused to place her in this situation, whatever sins she herself may have committed, whatever kind of abuse may have been done against her, whatever kind of sorrow may have been brought about if there were any children involved. We sometimes waste too much time rashly judging the brokenness of our neighbors. Whatever else Jesus had said to her in private that didn't end up being written down there in Scripture, she comes away from meeting Jesus saying to others, "Come and see a man who has told me everything I have done." See, it doesn't really matter what others may think of us or may think they think of us. What matters is what Jesus knows of you. That Jesus knows all you have ever done. Jesus knows all that has ever happened to you. Jesus knows whatever pain is in your soul. And it's to this woman and to you that Jesus offers life-giving water there at the well. It is to her and to you that Jesus reveals himself to be the one that your soul really longs for. And it is to her and to you that he invites you to return and follow. Do not be afraid, for I have redeemed you, says the Lord. I have called you by name. You are mine.